welcome to another episode of Business PNG. On this episode, we feature the 2017 National Budget, which was today presented in Parliament. According to Minister for Treasury Pruaitch, the budget was framed against a relatively weak global economic environment, relatively moderate domestic economic activity constrained by the persistent low commodity prices. Despite this, however, the O'Neill Dion government remained confident, maintaining priority areas and aims to achieve a sectorial balance with the available resources. The Minister for Treasury wasn't available for comment. However, Business PNG had an exclusive interview with Secretary for Treasury, Mr. Dairivele.
The thing to remember is that we're the largest employer and we're the largest investor. So the more that we are investing, particularly in our infrastructure program, when we're building more roads, schools, bridges, hospitals, people are being employed. And I think one of the questions that we got earlier on is that when we do borrow and we allow these large projects to go ahead and not enough of our people are employed, obviously we don't get that growth. So the best thing that we can do, and we've taken this approach in terms of our employment, is to make sure that we employ as many Papua New Guineans as possible. When we are cutting programs, we try not to cut in those areas where there are high employment, because at the end of the day, these people get a wage. They get that wage and they go and they buy goods and services from our businesses. Those businesses make a bit of a profit, and then they get out there and they invest with the banks. They keep their money in the banks, and the banks lend it out again. So that's, again, very basically how we're focusing. If we were to, and I think that's why we're talking about a responsible fiscal consolidation. If we were to cut our spending too quickly, then I think the business community will really, really suffer. So we're hoping that by rebasing the recurrent budget in particular, and as I was talking about cutting away some of the wastage, those are monies and that shouldn't have been made in the first place. Those are decisions that shouldn't have been made. And so I think we're on the right path in terms of our investment program. And then in terms of our reforms, we need to make it easier to do business in Papua New Guinea. We need to focus on trying to engage more directly with the private sector. We talk about large business, talk about public-private partnerships, even at the more micro level. I think previously, you can imagine, Marco, that from DSIP, PSIP, we put, a couple of billion kina out there in the economy. Prior to 2012, that money wasn't available. So we'd like to think that by maintaining our commitment to 10 million kina to Provincial Support Services Improvement Program, to the District Services Improvement Program, and now we're adding another layer with the ward level Services Improvement Program, that we're putting more money out into the rural Papua New Guinea than ever before. So I think the rebalancing by the private sector is to move away from Port Moresby, move away from Hagen, move away from Kokopo, because there's a lot of money to be made also out there in the rural areas. We're not at that stage yet. Where we are really is, as I was trying to make in my presentation earlier on, is that we've just grown so big. I was surprised at the number, 125 different agencies, different departments. It's completely unsustainable.
I was actually blown away from that number.
Completely, yeah. And then when you think there's in 2004 we had 80,000 employees, and now we're at 136,000 employees. We're just growing and growing and growing. It's those types of things that we're trying to cut. My fear, Marco, really is that when the good times turn, and again, this is the difference between austerity and consolidation, because we haven't seen any revenues from PNG LNG. What we've got is all the money that they're pushing out into the community themselves, and we're getting some dividends. But we're hoping to see tax revenues. Once they've paid back their $19 billion, we've paid back our $19 billion, and we can get to paying some taxes like everybody else. Then we have the opportunities that are there with Wafi Gold Pool project. And I know they've been on your program as well, talking about some of the things that they're trying to do. Ultimately, mining's got a larger footprint than petroleum. Petroleum is just a hole in the ground. With mining, you get much, much more employment. So I think the numbers are looking like 4,000 employed going forward. Out at PNG LNG right now, you'd be lucky to find 300 people employed. I think we've got Frida River, again, in the medium term, which, as I understand it, is the biggest find of its kind this century. Again, the numbers there would be in the order of 4,000 to 5,000 employees going forward. And of course, with our petroleum, we've still got the expansion of PNG LNG. Hopefully they bring Penyang on, and that's ready to go. And of course, we've got Elk Antelope in the Gulf province set to go. So I think what we're doing is putting ourselves in a very, very good position. We're investing in our future by cutting back all this excess now. So when those, I guess the challenge for us is when those good times do come back, that we don't cut all of these departments now and we don't cut the size of the spending now, and as soon as the money's back, we blow up. And Marco, I haven't been in the public service for long, but when I first came in, we would do things like go to a conference in Leh. I would go with 3 of my managers, and each of us would have a car. It would blow my mind away. In the private sector, you just don't do that. You get one car and everybody jumps in.
It's fantastic that you're saying that.
Absolutely. So when we went to a recent conference, the chief secretary and I shared a car. And it wasn't even our car, it belonged to the Department of Works. So I think, things that in the private sector we take for granted because we're always chasing that profit. And I think for us right now, we're not a profit-oriented organization, but we are going to chase that savings. We are going to chase that saving. Let's change the culture so that when we do have good times, we shouldn't be spending so much money on the public service. We should be spending more money on roads, schools, bridges and hospitals, because ultimately that's what changes the lives of our people.
Business PNG also had an exclusive chat from a member from the private sector, John Lay of the PNG Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Overall, it's obviously a very tight budget. The government's facing a very tight fiscal position. I was looking forward to seeing what the projected deficit was, and at 2.5%, I think that represents an attempt to be quite disciplined from a fiscal point of view, and we could have seen 6 or 7%, in the present circumstances, which would have been potentially challenging. Having said that, I do have some question marks. I mean, there's about $1 billion kina, if I'm reading the numbers correctly, coming out of capital expenditure in the forthcoming year, which could potentially have quite a dampening effect on the economy. Now, I think the business community will be understanding of that, in that they're aware of the difficult fiscal position that the government's facing. On the revenue side, they are saying, once again, and this is again consistent with the position that the PNG Chamber has been putting, and that is that there should be additional resources given to the IRC in particular and the Customs Authority to more effectively collect the taxes that are already owing. So in a sense where it's a positive to see them making an attempt to collect what's already owing rather than introducing new taxes or basically introducing new taxes. So they have introduced a few tax measures, and some of them could potentially over time be quite significant, but they haven't increased the rate of GST, they haven't increased the income tax rates with a couple of little exceptions, and that's a positive thing. And so their attempts to improve compliance, in other words, encourage the businesses that are not presently paying their fair share to pay their fair share, is a positive thing, which we applaud. There was concern expressed from the floor about the need for consultation. I think that's fine. I think by and large what they're targeting is the people that are not already paying taxes. So for the compliant businesses, I think they would generally welcome the efforts to bring the others into the system. Agriculture, I was kind of hoping there might be some more support for agriculture. The 100 million kina, which I think has been in the last 2 budgets for potential investment in agriculture projects, I don't think it's been spent, or if it's been spent, or I'm not aware of it being spent in the last couple of years. That number's in any case reduced down to 30 million kina this year. I think in principle that's a very good idea, and to some extent what was said was that they're looking to set up sort of guidelines and protocols and things about how that money will be spent, which is also a good thing, along the lines we already have in the minerals and oil and gas sector. So to do a kind of similar thing with agriculture, albeit on a small scale at this point, is quite a good thing to enable mobilisation of land and involvement in agriculture by the traditional owners of the various areas where there's agricultural potential. Yes, I made the general point before that the reduction in capital expenditure by $1 billion kina, approximately, if that's what it is, I think that's what it says, will have a dampening effect on the economy generally, because obviously, I mean, the government's done a good job in some ways of keeping the economy going when the construction period of the LNG project finished. I mean, you could say, oh, too much of that was spent in Moresby, perhaps. And I would say that to some extent, although I don't disagree with much of what they've done in Moresby. There's been good things done. However, we do need to balance it up with expenditure in the rural areas and what have you, and particularly where there's potential for agricultural production, an economic return from the expenditure. That would be what we would say should happen. So there's that. There are a couple of changes in the oil and gas, minerals and oil and gas sector, like the taking away the exemption for interest for lenders. I think this will attract some commentary. I think that will be something that people will probably object to. And there's some also changes to the additional profits tax, which essentially restore it to what it had been previously. And again, that's probably that would be a matter for some debate as to the wisdom of doing that. I personally think it's a good thing.
Does inflation around 6% starting to worry you?
I don't think that's I don't think that's out of the range of what you'd expect. When you say start to worry, in what sense? I mean, if it was a lot more, we'd be worried. It would be surprising for it to be a lot more, based on the budget settings. Yeah. Yeah.
The visitors on their way, so please, if you could move back to your respective places, so that when they arrive, we're not in chaos. So please.
Oh, sorry.
Go back to your respective seats now.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, right. Okay.
Our schools.
The Treasury Secretary said this morning in the budget lockup they were confident going forward amidst the slow economic growth in the global economy. While the International Monetary Fund is projecting nominal growth of 3.1% in the global economy, the impacts won't be felt until much later.
So the cuts are targeted at all of these unnecessary, non-essential services that have become a part of the culture of Papua New Guinea public service over the last 10 years.
The uncertainty presented is reflected in the many areas domestically. While the growth in the non-mining sector is projected to grow, that growth will be less than what was initially projected. And there have been cuts based on the 2016 supplementary budget figures. Total spending on health in 2017 is 1.2 billion kina. It represents 9.2% of the total budget. It looks big, but there's been a 20% cut in health from the supplementary budget figures. In education, 1.16 billion. There's also a reduction of 7.4%. But the government says it's maintaining the 602 million kina tuition fee-free funds.
The economic sector, which entails the strategic assets, has been the only sector with significant introduction of new projects in the 2016 budget. With regards to funding new projects in the sector, the government aims to improve income sources for small-scale farmers.
Provincial and district spending remains a key priority area. However, the Treasury Secretary has pointed out cash flow will continue to remain a problem for this government. The three significant areas of spending this year will be paying off loans, 1.3 billion kina, elections, 400 million, and APEC, 250 million.
In the 2016 budget.
Given the budget cuts in all sectors, funding from PSIP, DSIP and Ward SIP looks optimistic. The provinces received 3,605.7 million kina, or 28%, which is the largest share of the total budget.
Capital expenditure funding to sub-national government includes 10 million kina for per province in direct funding through the Provincial Services Improvement Program, 10 million kina per district under the District Services Improvement Program, and 100,000 kina per LLG government under the Local Level Government Services Improvement Program. An additional 10,000 kina is allocated to each ward with the removal of fixed sector allocations.
Major appropriations include PSIP 220 million kina, DSIP 890 million kina, LLG SIP 32.2 million kina, and Ward 61.8 million kina. Treasurer Veles says the DSIP grants are for infrastructure development in 89 districts in the country. But at times, these funds are not being allocated right down to the ward levels.
It's a wonder when you look at some of the wards whether 10,000 kina is going to make a lot of difference or not. I think really what it is it's a swift response to the complaint that money gets stuck at the province and district level and doesn't trickle down to the people on the ground.
The Ward SIP was specifically initiated for capacity building and funding ward councillors' allowances.
As you know, over the last 4 years, we've started a program to pay our ward councillors. I mean, these poor people have been, working for 13 years without getting paid, and it takes mental fortitude to commit to your people like that.
A happy electoral commissioner is confident that this will ensure successful elections next year.
The election administration, most cost of the election administration goes towards the allowances of the temporary election workers who are engaged to work for the election. We will engage about 30,000 public servants across the country. That's returning officers, assistant returning officers, polling officials, counting officials, and all host of temporary election workers that we engage to assist the Electoral Commission to conduct the election.
As announced by Treasury Secretary, 121 million kina of the 400 million kina funding is allocated for security purposes, while the rest is for the administration of the elections.
The expenditure would be mostly the election administration. I'm saying this because parts of Papua New Guinea, especially in the coastal and islands region, you don't have a lot of security threats. It's just mostly the urban areas plus the islands provinces. And so the police should be focusing on urban areas and islands provinces to manage security. So our priority and our focus should be on election administration.
An additional 30 million kina has also been promised this month to the Electoral Commission. This will be used to purchase what the Electoral Commissioner says are big-ticket items such as ballot boxes and printing of ballot papers.
The preparation for next day is mostly working on the polling schedules. The government has approved some new wards. So those are the ones that we'll bring them into our polling schedules and start planning where we will place the polling stations to conduct the election.
As of July this year, the Electoral Commission received an actual total of 46.8 million kina to cover election operations, recurrent costs, and by-elections in Samarai Murua, South Bougainville, and Kandap. As a priority for next year, the general elections will be one of the first sectors to receive funding once revenue starts rolling in.
I think that will be priority for us in terms of looking at the revenue inflows January, February of next year. The focus of that giving out to agencies will be on health education and the election itself.
The law and justice sector has received the fifth largest share of the 2017 national budget. This money will be divided amongst the Police Department, Judicial Services and the PNG Defence Force. Police Modernization Program was allocated 17 million kina. Judicial Services received 80 million kina for the Waigani Court Complex building, while 5 million kina was given to the PNG Defence Force for infrastructure development. For 2016, the sector was given 1.2 billion kina. From that money, the police department invested in police accommodation and the training of recruits. The judicial services had invested in the building complex at the Waigani Courthouse. The areas where the money will be spent in 2017 are the same areas where the government had spent money this year. Though the correctional services comes under the law and justice sector, not much funding was given to the department last year.
And that's all we have for this episode of Business PNG. For more information and to watch this episode again, visit MTV Online at the URL at the bottom of the screen. Or for more up-to-the-minute business news and updates, or to join the conversation, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Business PNG. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leon Durari, and this was Business PNG.